I'm Carl Bishop, the itinerant voice actor for Wise Brother Media, and today I'm talking to Jonathan Kite, who is an amazing comedian, impressionist actor, who is on, as you know, Two Broke Girls, on which you play Ukrainian cook Oleg. How you doing today, man?
Good, man. You have a great speaking voice.
Why, thank you.
People will tell me that they go, "Do you ever do announcements?" And I go, "No." I said, "I always sound like the first half of a NyQuil commercial." I always sound like the guy who you're like, "I can't go to work today because I'm sick," and then they're like, "All right, you take the NyQuil and now you sound better." Like, I feel better. They're like, "You don't sound better."
I think that's why your Trump impression is really good, because you kind of have that nasally sound that just allows you to go into that space. But now speak.
I think you're right. I think that's probably he's closer than I would admit.
Right, and thank you for the compliment, by the way. But now I came from a completely different background that you did. So you're right to say that I have a beautiful, mellifluous, smooth voice, because I studied voice in school, music, and I was training to be an opera singer. So I was so aware of like all these. I was taught to treat my instrument like I was putting it away in a violin case, and never drinking or smoking too late, which never seemed to work with me.
I was going to say cut to. Yeah, I remember all the opera singers, because we had an opera program where I went to school, and they all were the two things I remember about them is they all had scarves around their neck.
Always, yes.
They were all like they all looked like they were on their way to meet the king.
And they spoke that way too,
They totally did. You were 100% right.
Because when you speak to an opera singer, he kind of has his voice raised in the mask like this. When you hear interviews with him.
There's a very I always say like when I was doing impressions of some of the British guys like Jason Statham or like Liam Neeson.
Oh yeah.
I would say in interviews they actually have very high voices. But then when you see them in a movie, like Jason Statham, he always drops 3 octaves.
It's amazing.
Because they're there's an aware, but for opera singers, I remember they were always in the middle of a Jason Statham movie. They always had that voice.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's so funny. So I remember the scars, and yeah, they always exactly treated it like an instrument. 100%.
We were all secret partiers except for the Sopranos. They never went out and did anything. But now,
not with that rate.
So I've always come from a place of very careful production, and that was my background. And so I think I went into a style that allowed me, I'm pretty versatile. I do commercial mostly, but I've done a video game. I've done some other stuff where I do some accents, not actual impressions, but just, an accent for a character. But with you sort of have that, and my production is very held back and very calculated. And you come from an actor. As an actor, you were classically trained, and then you went to improv. And so you have that complete. You come from a total direction of hey man, I'm me. I'm going to be completely honest all the time, and I'm just which I admire. I think that's really cool, and that's where I think the comedian in you comes out, or that's people that are trained in your way are more natural comedians, because I was trained to sort of censor myself in a way.
Well, I think that listen, what you do, it seems to service you just fine, because I think that I am so crap at doing. I do a lot of voiceovers, and I'm
right. You do.
So
you're character guy.
But you know what's so funny is I'm so bad at doing straight copy. I mean, I can sort of do it, and I've booked commercials.
What have you done?
For certain things, but I'll go into the booth with my agency, and there'll be another guy like you who just has Coleman lighter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's they slowly realize they're no. Unless it's a pineapple who's high on that, don't let it breathe for it. Just because it's just for me, I am not for voiceovers. I'm not trained. I never took a voiceover class.
Uh-huh.
And when we were in college, the stuff that I did, they never touched on that. Even though I think that, God, I wish they had, because the voiceover world is so. There's so many opportunities, and it's such a good way to make a living, and there's so much variety, and it's so fun. But for me, I think that because I sound I sound like a booger in a Nasonex commercial. So it's you don't, unless you're selling booger cream, I'm not going to sell you like Taco Bell. I mean, I guess I could be the guy who's like new gorditas.
Yeah,
but
you know
I'm
what?
not just going to be.
I think
you
you're
know,
doing. I think you're doing okay with the training and the approach that you've had for the last, your entire career. Because
I do go.
I
Okay,
think you're
but I
doing
think,
all right.
it's good. Like what you do, it's cool. Like there's so much variety in what we both do
Yeah.
in terms of like what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
That you have like a very sharp, like clean. Like there's a directness.
Right, but I
that
never have, like, part of my whole job is to never have a recognizable sound because I'm not an actor
Totally.
coming to a commercial. Like, name any one of them, any actor that's in a commercial these days.
Kevin Spacey, like
exactly.
Jonathan Price used to do those Jaguar commercials.
Right, and you can tell. It's like, oh, they booked him because they want Jonathan Price. They want that sound.
I do a bit about that. That's so funny. I literally do a bit about how, like, there's a lot of celebrities right now that are doing jobs, which I think is totally cool.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them don't.
I don't always. It's like I auditioned for that. Damn.
Yeah, I'm like, I guess I'm not cool enough. Bud Light. No, I've done. But it's like it's one of those things where I do a bit about Paul Giamatti doing Liberty Mutual commercials, and I was like, Paul Giamatti, who I love, one of my favorite actors. He sounds like a guy that is not good with money. So, like, I don't know why he's in the Liberty. Like, Paul Giamatti sounds like he doesn't keep his money in mutual funds.
Yeah.
That he keeps it under a mattress.
Yeah, and in wine futures.
Yeah, exactly, right. Or he's got timeshares that he's interested in.
So tell me, I want to talk about Oleg and Two Broke Girls. Were you inspired by Yakov Smirnoff or something for your impression, or where did that come from?
I had watched him. I came from because I'm from Chicago, and and my best friends growing up were all first generation Eastern Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
All of their parents. This guy, they had the very sort of everybody very thick accent, very thick. So they're and so we used to. That was probably the first mimic that I ever did as a kid.
That's great.
Or one of the first, but it was so listening to them and kind of growing up in those households. I mean, you're around it all the time, and obviously you absorb so much as a kid.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was just something that was probably the first accent that I ever learned.
Yeah.
Without even thinking about it, was like.
And for me, it was weird. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and it's kind of a flat accent like this. All my cousins are like, "Hey, Carl," and I never quite got it. Like my ear never picked it up. Like I could imitate it and have fun with it, but I always had this Middle Atlantic newscaster way of speaking. Anyways, but you had that gift. Isn't that great about big cities or really anywhere where there's a little bit of diversity and you've got an immigrant population?
You are so right.
You get it's like an actor's best friend. You're in a training ground the entire time.
And I'm not. That's the thing is, a lot of times, if I have my brain will naturally go to a real, a natural experience instead of a movie. So if somebody's like, "Do you know Russian?" It's funny because the Yakov Smirnoff, which I think that I've gotten that before because people go, "That reminds me." But the truth was, I actually didn't even think of him. My brain will go, "Oh yeah, but you knew Alex and you knew Elliot and like these people that I grew up with." Or I had a lot of friends that were from India, a lot of friends, and so. I don't think of I know he's not Indian, but I don't think of Apu from The Simpsons, even though I think that's where a lot of people think of that. I think of the guys that I grew up with just because that's really near and dear to my heart. These are people I was super close with, and we spent my formidable years with them. So when I have to when I have to think of somebody that's this accent, my brain immediately goes, "Did you know anybody who had that accent?" And then I try to pull memories out there instead of whereas with Scotland, I learned my Scottish accent from watching Train Spotting.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, but it was like but all four of them have a different Scottish accent.
Right.
And so that was how I learned. I love that movie so much, and I'd seen it so many times, and so I just picked it up from so for me, if the real example is not available, I definitely there are movies that I've pulled from, but I think in general. You're right. I was lucky enough to grow up because we have that. Chicago's the same way. There's a very
Chicago,
brats and beers. Chicago, and
Chicago. That's like that round kind of O. That's the only round O you've got.
Yes, exactly. Because I think that's that's the best thing. Besides, I really love my life, and the job is the Two Broke Girls is the greatest thing I've ever been a part of. Artistically, and I'm proud to be on a show that I love and respect so much with people that I care deeply about. But I think I love to travel. That's my hobby, and I always make a joke that I'm only an actor, so I can afford to travel like I do.
Yeah. Now, Okay, go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. And I love that the show is multicultural because
Yeah.
that's what America looks like.
That's right. That's right.
And that's what I love is having a guy. Han's character, is from Asia. We're from Europe.
Uh-huh.
Sophie and I love that aspect of the show.
Now, of the writing style on the show, on Two Broke Girls, employs a lot of old school sitcom style one-liners and jokes.
Absolutely.
It's done in
old
front of a
school,
live audience, which I'm sure the energy with that is fantastic, and it helps a lot with the
Electric.
feeling of the show.
It does.
Now, do you enjoy that rhythm over the kind of like the awkward comedy that's created with a show like The Office?
Well, I think at the end of the day, hard jokes really. There's nothing, and this is not a comparison to The Office.
Yeah, and I know I didn't mean to set one up. I was just wondering.
No. But I'm saying, but that's a good example. Whereas I think of because I think of like the Gervais Office, about how that is very British.
Yeah.
That there is real pain that's happening, and but I think that with our show, like those hard jokes, they're really punchlines, and I mean they are punchlines.
Yeah.
So I think that when you in terms of when you watch in reruns, they syndicate so well, and I'm not gonna say better than The Office or 30 Rock because I don't know how those numbers do, and I loved both those shows very much.
Right.
I every now and then I'll be in a hotel room when I'm because that's when I tend to watch TV when I'm on the road.
Yeah.
And the Two Broke Girls will be on, and there'll be an episode from season 2, which obviously I haven't thought about in 4 or 5 years. And then I'll watch it, and I will genuinely smile or laugh at the jokes. And I think that punch really is a universal thing.
Yeah.
And I think that we have a lot of physical comedy that even if people don't understand the language because we're so big in China, that a lot of people, young people do speak it, but the older people don't. But they get what's happening. Like they can, they get the rhythm, they get the energy, they get the kind of overall feeling of what's going on. And I think part of that comes from the rhythm of our voices and our movement, which is done in the traditional style.
Yeah. And so now you've got a comedy special on the way. It's called Jonathan Kite's Back to School Special. And what you do is you go back to your high school, the high school you graduated from, to do the show. Tell me about how that came together and what we can expect.
I always wanted to do stand-up my whole life, and that's one of the things that's great about the show is it affords, because I think most of the time, so one thing I wanted to do was learn a language, and I haven't learned one yet. But I always said, someone said, well, why haven't you done it? You go, well, I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
And I think time is the big thing that people always say is a deterrent of why they haven't done something that's on their bucket list.
Right.
And one summer in between season 1 and season 2, we knew we were getting picked up. I was at the Improv on Melrose in Hollywood with 2 of my really close friends who were stand-ups. And one of them was just like, then you should do it. You have all the time in the world, right? I couldn't accept another job because of scheduling conflicts. We were coming back. And so immediately in that moment, it just was like, yes, 100%.
Yep.
And I started getting up. And then I really wanted to put out, because, you do a material, and mine, I do a lot of impressions.
So did you suck at first? Does everyone suck at first?
Well, here's the thing. I got very lucky because I had done a sketch show with Jamie Foxx that was in the vein of In Living Color. That was right before Two Broke Girls, and I was the white guy. I loved it. Living Color. Yeah. In Living Color was so instrumental in shaping me in comedy. It was like some of my fondest memories. My parents and I used to watch it together, and I was like, "What an incredible show!"
I know
that for them to watch it with me with such a generation gap between us. And I remember them thinking this was the funniest thing. And so to me, to be a part of that, I had to learn impressions because they were like, "Well, they're going to cast a white guy," and I was like, "Well, how do I become every white?"
Yeah,
which is what I referred to myself as. So I had to learn impressions that I go, well, this guy's going to be doing this, or figuring it out so that I can make myself useful, especially if they were only going to cast one white guy.
Yeah.
And so for my stand-up, I started just turning the sketches that I had kind of worked on in that environment into solo pieces, which is very hard. It was not, for me it was, because you're used to having this dialogue, this back and forth. The other person is helping you with the given circumstances in the scene. But then, like, you know, and I didn't want it to be, I didn't want it to be not cheesy, but I wanted it to have a purpose. I wanted to have actual commentary. I didn't want it to be like Christopher Walken opens a deli.
Yeah.
And then just do like Christopher Walken
Right.
talking about roast beef. And that just wasn't interesting to me. I mean, good for other people. Like, I don't criticize that, but that's not the kind of comedy I wanted to do.
Right.
And so I think that was the hardest thing. It gave me a jumping off point, but it was a really weird transition to try to start to write those pieces. And so I kind of been going around for like 3 or 4 years. I said, a lot of these are topical because they're impressions. I want to get them out there. I don't want to sit on this, you know, be doing like, topical humor 10 years later. It helps me to keep writing. So my team said, well, you should do it at a club or a theater that really helped break you, that really helped promote you and launch you. And I said, that for me, because I've been doing stand-up for such a short period of time, the only place I could think of was my high school auditorium, was my high school theater program. And it's outside of Chicago. So I went back. I'm still close to the theater director. I called him. I said, I'd love to do a back-to-school special. I mean, if the high school would have me, what can we do? So nice. Tim Ortman is so instrumental in helping it. And then this past summer, in July, the weekend after July 9th, I think it was when it was, we did it. And
Awesome.
It was crazy. Like, people showed up, which, honest to God, I'm not, I wasn't sure if people were going to show up because they didn't know me in that aspect. It's
yeah,
like,
that's great.
so, and they did, and so it was cool, and we just finished editing it, and we're having the premiere screening next week, a week from today.
You're still trying to find a network, and you're not there yet, but you will be keeping an eye on your social media feed just to see when and where we can see it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. And Jonathan, thank you so much for the conversation. It's been a pleasure. I really had a great time.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, there you have it. Another edition of The Itinerant Voice Actor with me, Carl Bishop. My little podcast that no one listens to, but everyone should. Special thanks to Johnny and Robert at Wise Brother Media, celebrity booker Paul Adamo, my partner in crime, David Levin at Brainstorm Inc., and the super talented Noel Honig at the Drawing Room NYC. More episodes of The Itinerant Voice Actor coming soon. Thanks for listening.